October 14, 1943, 11:15 a.m., 26,000 feet above the Rhine Valley. The air up here doesn't just feel cold, it feels hostile. At 50 degrees below zero, the condensation on the inside of Oberleutnant Hans Weber's canopy has turned to jagged frost. He scrapes a small porthole through the ice with a gloved thumb, his breath huffing in short rhythmic bursts through the rubber oxygen mask. His Focke-Wulf 190 vibrates with the raw, mechanical anger of its BMW radial engine. It is a predator, a machine built for one purpose, to tear the wings off the invaders. And the invaders are here. Ahead, they look like a swarm of angry midges against the deep blue of the stratosphere. But as Weber pushes the throttle forward, closing the distance at a combined speed of 600 miles per hour, the midges grow into monsters, the B-17 flying fortresses. They are flying in a combat box. Formation, an interlocking grid of machine gun fire that the Luftwaffe pilots call the Polk. Weber's heart hammers against his ribs. He knows the drill. You don't attack these beasts from the rear anymore. The tail gunners will chew you to pieces. You go for the nose, head on. You play chicken with a 30-ton aluminum heavy bomber. Angreifen. The command crackles in his headset. Attack. Weber rolls the FW-190 inverted and pulls through, lining up his sights on the lead bomber of the low squadron. The B-17 grows rapidly in his Reeve gun sight, its wide wings spanning the entire glass reticle. He sees the flashes from the chin turret. The Americans are firing back. Tracers zip past his canopy like angry hornets. He holds his nerve. Wait. At 800 yards, he squeezes the trigger. The shutter of his own 20mm cannons rattles his teeth. He watches the trajectory of the Minenjesco's high-explosive mine shells designed to blow giant holes in metal skin. He sees the impacts. 1, 2, 3 flashes on the B-17 starboard wing root. This is the kill shot. Weber knows the anatomy of a B-17 better than he knows his own wife's face. The wing root houses the main fuel tanks, high-octane aviation fuel. A single spark in that vapor-filled aluminum coffin should turn the bomber into a fireball. He expects the sudden bloom of orange flame, the structural failure, the wing shearing off, the spinning descent of a dying giant. He pulls up hard to avoid a collision, the G-forces crushing him into his seat, waiting for the explosion in his rearview mirror. But when he levels out and looks back, his stomach drops. The B-17 is still there. It's smoking, trailing a thick, gray ribbon from the starboard wing, but it hasn't deviated an inch from its formation. It hasn't exploded. It hasn't even slowed down. It just absorbs the punishment like a boxer who doesn't feel pain. Did you see that? His wingman's voice cracks over the radio, panic bleeding into the static. I hit him. I hit the fuel cells. He should be dead. Weber stares at the retreating formation. The bomber he just hammered with high explosives is still flying, its 4 engines churning relentlessly toward the target. It defies the laws of physics. It defies the laws of war. For the German pilots, this is becoming a terrifying pattern. In 1940, against British Blenheims or early Soviet fighters, a hit to the fuel tank meant a kill. It was simple math. Metal plus fire plus fuel equals explosion. But these Americans, they are bringing something different to the skies of Europe. They are flying ghosts. Machines that bleed but refuse to die. Weber checks his ammo counter. He's low. He banks his fighter toward the cloud deck below, frustration burning hotter than his engine. As he descends, leaving the contrails of the impossibly resilient bombers behind him, a chilling realization settles in the cockpit. They aren't just fighting men anymore. They are fighting an industrial juggernaut that has engineered the luck right out of the equation. Back at the airfield, the mood is grim. Weber climbs out of his cockpit, his legs shaking from the adrenaline dump. The ground crew rushes to refuel, but Weber walks past them, pulling off his flight cap. He finds his Staffelkapitän squadron commander leaning against the operations table, staring at a reconnaissance photo. "They kept coming," Weber says, the words tasting like ash. "I put 3 shells into the wing tanks. 3, it didn't burn." The commander looks up, his eyes hollow. He slides a pack of cigarettes across the table. "The intelligence sent us a report on a crashed unit recovered near Schweinfurt," he says quietly. "They call them Tokyo tanks. Self-sealing rubber bladders. You put a hole in it, the fuel reacts with the rubber, it expands, and the hole closes. In seconds." Weber lights a cigarette, his hand trembling slightly. "So we can't burn them?" "We can burn them," the commander replies, looking out the window at the gray sky. "But we have to hit them twice as hard. And while we are reloading, they are bombing our cities." Weber exhales smoke, looking at the ceiling. The Americans have brought armor to a knife fight, and the Luftwaffe is starting to realize that their knives are getting dull. But the fuel tanks are just the beginning. The German engineers are about to discover that the pilots inside these bombers are being protected by something even more frustrating than rubber bladders. November 26, 1943, 12:30 p.m. Over the skies of Bremen, Germany. The sky is a tapestry of violence. Black puffs of flak hang suspended in the freezing air like stepping stones for giants. Inside his Messerschmitt Bf 109 G6, Feldwebel Karl Müller is sweating despite the bitter cold. He is hunting. His target is a straggler, a B-17 that has fallen slightly behind the protection of the combat box. This is the moment Luftwaffe pilots pray for, a wounded animal separated from the herd. Müller dives from the high 6th position, screaming down from 30,000 feet. The airspeed indicator needles past 700 kilometers per hour. The controls stiffen, fighting his grip. He doesn't go for the engines this time. He goes for the brain, the cockpit. Through the whirling propeller arc, he aligns his sights on the flight deck of the American bomber. He can clearly see the pilots' heads through the plexiglass, 2 dark figures framed against the pale instrument panels. They are human, flesh and blood. If you kill the pilot, the machine dies. It's the oldest rule of combat. At 400 meters, Müller unleashes everything. The 13mm heavy machine guns mounted on his cowl hammer in sync with the 20mm cannon firing through the propeller hub. Thump, thump, thump. He watches the tracers stitch a line of destruction right across the B-17's nose. He sees the plexiglass windscreen shatter. He sees sparks fly from the fuselage just below the window line. He pulls up sharply, G-forces graying out his vision, confident that he has just decapitated the beast. He banks around, expecting to see the bomber nosediving, spinning out of control as the dead pilot slumps over the control column. Instead, the B-17 corrects its course. It levels its wings. It throttles up. It begins to climb back toward the safety of the formation. "Impossible," Müller whispers, the word lost in the roar of his Daimler-Benz engine. "I saw the hits. I saw them enter the cockpit. He isn't hallucinating. He did hit the cockpit." What Müller doesn't see, what he can't see from his perch in the sky, is the scene inside that bomber. Inside the B-17, the American pilot is stunned, covered in shards of glass, the wind howling through the shattered windshield at 200 miles per hour. A 13mm bullet has just slammed into the back of his seat. In a German fighter, or a British Spitfire, that bullet would have punched through the seat and severed the pilot's spine. But the Americans have bolted a heavy plate of hardened steel armor directly behind the pilot's seat. It catches the round with a deafening clang, absorbing the kinetic energy that was meant to kill. And it's not just the seat. The pilot looks down at his chest. He is wearing a bulky, cumbersome garment that looks like a baseball catcher's chest protector. It's the M1 Flyer's vest, a sandwich of manganese steel plates sewn into canvas. A piece of jagged flak shrapnel, razor sharp and hot enough to cauterize the wound it makes, is embedded in the vest inches from his heart. The pilot pulls it out, shakes his head, and grabs the yoke. He is bruised, he is terrified, but he is alive. And because he is alive, the bomber fights on. Back in the Messerschmitt, Muller is gripped by a creeping sense of dread. The psychological impact is devastating. To the German pilots, these Americans are starting to seem less like soldiers and more like automatons. When you shoot a man, he falls. When you shoot a machine, it breaks. But these Americans? They take a cannon shell to the face and keep flying. Muller breaks off the attack. He has no ammunition left. As he turns toward home, he looks back at the straggler. It has successfully rejoined the formation, merging back into the deadly geometry of the Polk. It's not just the durability of the planes that is breaking the Luftwaffe's morale. It is the realization that the enemy cares more about pilot survival than aerodynamic efficiency. The Germans stripped their planes of weight to gain climb rate and speed. The Americans bolted on thousands of pounds of armor, accepting a slower plane in exchange for a crew that comes home to fight again tomorrow. And that is the crux of the nightmare for the German High Command. They aren't just losing the battle of production. They are losing the battle of attrition. Every American crew that survives a fatal hit is a veteran crew that returns next week, smarter, harder, and deadlier. But as the winter of 1943 turns into the bloody spring of 1944, the Luftwaffe is about to face a new horror. It isn't just that the bombers are hard to kill. It's that soon, they won't be coming alone. The Americans are about to introduce a new player to the game. A sleek silver guardian that can go where no fighter has gone before, carrying the war right to the doorsteps of the German airfields. March 6, 1944, 1 p.m. The skies over Berlin. The impossible has become routine. General Lieutenant Adolf Galland, General of Fighters, stands on the tarmac at a forward airfield near the capital. The roar overhead is deafening, a continuous thrumming vibration that shakes the dust off the hangar windows. He isn't looking at his own planes. He is looking at theirs. Above him, a stream of American bombers stretches from horizon to horizon. They are returning from the first massive daylight raid on Berlin. Galland brings his binoculars to his eyes, and what he sees chills him to the bone. He spots a B-17 at the edge of the formation. The aircraft is a wreck. The vertical stabilizer, the tail fin, is shredded, practically non-existent. The starboard inner engine is feathered, the propellers standing dead still. There is a gaping hole in the fuselage the size of a grand piano where a flak shell detonated. By every aerodynamic calculation, Galland knows, and he knows them all, that plane should be a spiraling pile of debris in a potato field. It should not be flying. But it is. The pilot is fighting the yoke, the crew is likely bailing out unnecessary weight, but the machine itself is holding together. The rugged skeleton of the Boeing airframe, designed with redundancy upon redundancy, refuses to buckle. They are flying junk heaps home, a young aide mutters beside Galland, his voice trembling. Why won't they fall? This is the broken equation that is driving the Luftwaffe leadership to the brink of madness. For years, German pilot training was based on efficiency. Calculate the angle, fire a 2-second burst, conserve ammunition, move to the next target. But against these armored giants, efficiency is failing. Reports are flooding in from the squadrons. Pilots are depleting their entire ammunition drums to bring down a single bomber, leaving them defenseless against the Americans' newest surprise. Galland lowers his binoculars and scans the higher altitudes. There, weaving protective S-turns above the battered bombers, are the slim silver shapes of P-51 Mustangs. This was the final nail in the coffin. Until recently, the Luftwaffe could wait. They could wait for the American fighter escorts to hit their fuel limit and turn back at the German border. Then, The wolves could descend on the sheep. They could take their time, line up their shots, and hammer the B-17s until the armor finally gave way. But the Mustang changed the rules. It has drop tanks. It has the range to fly all the way to Berlin and back. Now, the German pilots are forced to make desperate, high-speed slashing attacks. They have mere split seconds to fire before a Mustang is on their tail. In those split seconds, they might score hits, they might riddle a B-17 with machine gun fire or land a glancing. Cannon blow, but because of the self-sealing tanks, because of the armor plate, because of the redundant electrical systems, hits are no longer enough. You need a catastrophe to stop a B-17. And the Mustangs are ensuring the Germans don't have the time to create one. Inside the debriefing room at a nearby Jag-Jeschwader base, the atmosphere is toxic with frustration. Oberleutnant Weber, surviving yet another sortie, slams his flight helmet onto the table. His face is smeared with oil and sweat. "I hit him!" Weber shouts, his hands mimicking the aerial maneuvering. "I raked his fuselage from the cockpit to the tail. I saw the pieces flying off. I saw the smoke." The intelligence officer, a pale man surrounded by teleprinter tapes, looks up wearily. "Which unit?" "Red tail markings." "The lead ship," Weber insists. The intelligence officer sighs and picks up a transcript intercepted from the American radio chatter. "That group is reporting 0 losses, Oberleutnant. They are all crossing the channel." Weber stares at the officer. The silence in the room is heavy, suffocating. "I saw the smoke," Weber whispers, his confidence crumbling. "They have fire suppression systems," the officer replies remotely. "They feather the prop, cut the fuel feed, and the fire goes out. The smoke stops. They fly home on 3 engines. Sometimes 2. Weber sinks into a chair. It feels like fighting a hydra. You cut off a head, you smash a wing, you pierce the heart, and the monster just keeps plodding forward, dropping its bombs, and turning around to do it again tomorrow. The psychological toll is becoming heavier than the physical one. The Luftwaffe is losing experienced pilots at an alarming rate, not just to enemy fire, but to exhaustion and despair. They are throwing themselves against a wall of aluminum and steel that seems to have no breaking point. And as the sun sets over the smoking ruins of the German aircraft industry, a terrifying truth settles over the high command. The Americans haven't just built a better bomber. They have built a system of war that tolerates damage. They have engineered a machine that forgives human error and resists mechanical failure. The Germans are looking for a weakness, a glass jaw. But the B-17 doesn't have a jaw. It is all bone. But the story of the Flying Fortress has one final chapter. As the Allies prepare for the invasion of Normandy, the B-17 is about to face its ultimate test. The Luftwaffe, desperate and dying, will authorize a tactic that requires no aim, no calculation, and no survival: the collision. April 7, 1945, 11:45 a.m., over the Steinhuder Meer, northern Germany. Desperation has a sound. It isn't a scream or a siren. It is the eerie, high-pitched whine of a Messerschmitt Bf 109 that has been stripped of its armor, its heavy cannons, and its radio. Inside the cockpit sits Fahnenjunker Klaus Richter. He is 20 years old. He has less than 60 hours of flight time. He is part of Sonderkommando Elbe. The Luftwaffe High Command has finally accepted the grim reality. Shooting at the B-17s is no longer enough. The armored cockpits save the American pilots. The self-sealing tanks swallow the incendiary rounds. The redundant airframes laugh at flak. So, the orders have changed. Today, Klaus is not a hunter. He is a bullet. "Ram them," the briefing officer had said, his eyes avoiding the faces of the young men in the room. "Aim for the tail. Cut it off with your propeller. Bail out if you can. If you can." Ahead, the American bomber stream is a wall of silver stretching into the haze. It is the might of the industrial world, endless and unstoppable. Klaus grips the stick with white knuckles. He picks his target, a B-17G positioned on the outer edge of the formation. He pushes the throttle through the gate. The stripped-down fighter leaps forward, light and skittish without the weight of its heavy guns. He is closing at 400 miles per hour. As he approaches, the B-17 grows into a terrifying mountain of aluminum. The rear gunner spots him. Klaus sees the twin sparkles of the tail guns. Bullets hammer his cowling, pinging off the engine block. He doesn't flinch, he doesn't evade. There is no point. He isn't trying to shoot the pilot. He isn't trying to ignite the fuel. He is trying to break the bone. Sieg Heil. He screams into the dead radio, a hollow cry for a dying empire, and pulls the stick back. The collision is not a crash, it is a cataclysm. The nose of the Messerschmitt slams into the fuselage of the B-17 just behind the waist gunner's window. The sound is the shriek of tearing metal, louder than the engines, louder than the wind. The German fighter disintegrates instantly, its engine block shearing through the B-17's empennage like a guillotine. For a split second, chaos reigns. The B-17 lurches violently, its tail section hanging by shredded tendons of steel and control cables. Klaus is thrown clear of the wreckage, his parachute opening into the freezing slipstream. As he drifts down, battered and bleeding, he watches his handiwork. He expects the B-17 to plummet. He expects the death spiral. But the B-17 fights back. The American bomber is missing a third of its horizontal stabilizer. The rudder is flapping uselessly in the wind. The fuselage is buckled, and yet the nose stays up. You can almost feel the sheer brute force of the American pilots wrestling the yoke, standing on the rudder pedals, forcing the crippled giant to maintain altitude. The engines roar in protest, compensating for the drag of the ruined tail. It doesn't spin, it doesn't burn. It begins a slow, agonizing descent, banking gently toward the west, toward Allied lines. Klaus hangs in his chute, watching the dead bomber refuse to die. Even when used as a battering ram, the Luftwaffe cannot guarantee a kill. The B-17 is simply too tough. It was built to absorb punishment that defies engineering logic. On that day, Sonderkommando Elbe loses dozens of pilots. They ran nearly 20 bombers. But the bomber stream does not break. It does not turn back. The surviving B-17s close the gaps in the formation and fly on to their targets. The message is clear. You can shoot them. You can burn them. You can even throw your own planes at them like rocks. But you cannot stop them. As Klaus hits the ground, rolling into the mud of a German spring, the roar of the engines fades to the east. The bombs are falling on the fatherland. The resistance of the Luftwaffe has broken not against the skill of the American pilots, but against the durability of their machines. The B-17 didn't just win the air war with bombs. It won it by surviving. It won by breaking the spirit of the men sent to destroy it. But there is one final image that will haunt the surviving German officers long after the surrender is signed. It isn't the sight of a burning city. It is the sight of a B-17 sitting on a runway after the war, a testament to why the Luftwaffe failed. May 12, 1945, 9 a.m., a captured airfield near Munich, Germany. The guns are finally silent. The sky, for the first time in years, is just empty blue space. No contrails, no flak, no screaming engines. Oberleutnant Hans Weber walks across the cracked concrete of the airfield. He is a prisoner of war now, but today, the American guards have granted him a strange courtesy. They are letting him walk the flight line. He stops in front of a B-17G Flying Fortress. It sits on its landing gear, heavy and imposing, casting a long shadow over the man who spent 2 years trying to destroy it. Up close, the machine is shocking. In the air, it was just a silhouette, a target. On the ground, it is a ruin. Weber walks slowly around the fuselage. He runs a gloved hand over the aluminum skin. It is cold and rough. He counts the patches. There are dozens of them, squares of fresh metal riveted over jagged holes. He stops at the starboard wing. There is a hole the size of a dinner plate where a flak shell punched through. He peers inside. There it is. The Tokyo tank. He sees the thick, multi-layered rubber bladder. He sees the discoloration where the fuel had leaked and the rubber had swollen to seal the wound. It looks organic, like a scab healing over flesh. He remembers the patrol over the Rhine, watching his 20mm shells strike this exact spot, waiting for the fire that never came. This is why, he thinks. This is why you didn't burn. He moves to the nose. The plexiglass is new, but the frame is bent. He climbs up through the hatch, moving awkwardly into the cockpit. It smells of stale sweat, leather, and hydraulic fluid, the universal scent of war. He sits in the pilot's seat. It is cramped. But then he feels it. He reaches behind his head and knocks his knuckles against the seat back. Clang. Solid, hardened steel. He looks at the floor. More armor. He looks at the heavy flat curtains bunched up by the windows. Tears prick at the corners of Weber's eyes. It isn't anger. It is a profound, crushing realization. The German philosophy of aircraft design was about performance. They built the Me-262 jet faster than anything in the world. They built the FW-190 agile and deadly. They built machines to kill. But the Americans? They built a machine to survive. They sacrificed speed for steel. They sacrificed climb rate for redundancy. They built a plane that said to its crew, "I will take the bullet so you don't have to." Weber realizes now that he wasn't just fighting a bomber. He was fighting a philosophy. The Luftwaffe viewed its pilots as warriors to be spent. The Americans viewed their pilots as an investment to be protected. He climbs back down to the tarmac and looks up at the nose art painted on the side of the fuselage. It's a cartoon of a rabbit holding a bomb with the words "Lucky Lady" painted in cursive script. But luck had nothing to do with it. It was engineering. It was the armor plate that stopped Muller's bullet. It was the self-sealing tank that choked Weber's fire. It was the rugged airframe that held together when Klaus rammed it with his fighter. Weber lights his cigarette, the smoke drifting up toward the silent engines. He understands now why the bomber stream never stopped. It wasn't just that there were so many of them. It was that the men flying them knew the machine would bring them home. When you trust your machine, you fly straighter. You fly into the teeth of the flak without flinching. You hold the formation when the fighters scream in. The B-17 didn't win the war because it was invincible. It won because it convinced the Luftwaffe that it was. Weber drops his cigarette and crushes it under his boot. He turns his back on the flying fortress and walks toward the prisoner-holding area. The war is over. The invaders have landed. And the machine that refused to die sits quietly on the runway, a scarred, battered, magnificent testament to the sheer stubbornness of survival.